The Senate is moving forward with a bipartisan short-term funding bill designed to keep the government open until mid-November. But it's unclear if the Republican-led House will approve it, raising fears the government will shut down over the weekend. NBC News senior congressional reporter Scott Wong joins us now with the latest. Scott, good morning. So as we just said, the Senate's come up with a plan to try and keep things open until November 17th. What are the odds this passes in the House? Just what are the main sticking points right now?
Good morning, Joe. Yes, you're right. The Senate does have a plan. That plan is bipartisan, backed by both Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. However, Speaker Kevin McCarthy says that that plan will go nowhere in the House of Representatives. He says that will be flatly rejected by House Republicans because Republicans are demanding steep spending cuts in any CR that goes forward. And in the Senate plan, they are funding things at existing levels. So that is a huge sticking point. Secondly, is the issue of Ukraine. The Senate plan includes $6 billion for economic and military aid for Ukraine. House Republicans, a large majority of them, want no money for Ukraine, saying the focus should be instead back here on the domestic front. And so those are some real big problems and explain why there is this big gulf between House Republicans and Democrats who control the Senate and the White House.
You know, another factor, we know McCarthy is in a tough spot. He relied on help from ultra-conservatives to become Speaker in the first place, but now he might need Democrats' help to keep the government open, but that could cost him his speakership. So what are you hearing are his chances of both passing a spending bill and actually hanging on to his leadership position?
Yeah, McCarthy is in a really sticky situation here, as you laid out. I mean, he promised the conservatives, in order to grab that speaker's gavel, deep spending cuts through these appropriation bills that they are working through right now. Those are a non-starter for Democrats in the Senate and for President Joe Biden. And so he is in this situation here where we are 4 days away from the deadline. He needs to reach across the aisle to avert a shutdown and team up with Democrats. And on top of that, you have a conservative lawmaker named Matt Gaetz who says, look, Kevin McCarthy, if you go that route, if you bring a short-term bill to the floor, if you extend your hands to Democrats, then I'm going to make a motion or force a vote on the floor to remove you as Speaker of the House. And so he is really in a no-win situation here, having to choose between the speakership, a job he has coveted his entire political career and achieved it, and shutting down the government, which will impact millions and millions of Americans in terms of federal benefits, as well as forcing millions, potentially millions of federal workers to go without a paycheck for the foreseeable future, Joe.
All right, Scott Wong, thank you so much. Let's take a deeper look at the impact this potential crisis could have on the economy if Congress doesn't act by the end of the month. That's Saturday night at midnight. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers could face being furloughed if that happens. That means they won't get paid. Now, a little history. The last government shutdown back in 2019 lasted 34 days. It ended up costing tens of billions of dollars. Let's bring in NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung for more on this. So, Brian, what have we learned from 2019 that could maybe help us manage a shutdown this year?
Well, it's going to have a big impact across the country and in other communities specifically as well. But I want to point out, let's look at what happened the last time we had a shutdown, which was in 2019. As you mentioned, 300,000 people were furloughed. They didn't get pay. We also lost about $11 billion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. At the time, $3 billion was estimated to have been permanently lost, just simply didn't get back. Now, in terms of the specific agencies, we saw situations like with TSA and even at the IRS that some workers just simply didn't show up. You have to remember that even those that aren't furloughed would still have to continue to work without pay for however long that shutdown goes. But for what it's worth, Wall Street didn't seem to care that much. Markets went up 10% during that last shutdown.
So, Brian, many federal workers obviously located in the Washington, D.C. area. How would a shutdown affect that area in particular?
Yeah, well, when we talk about the impact of a government shutdown on individual households, we're looking specifically at that DMV area. There are over 500,000 federal workers across those 3 states. And we actually took a look by the numbers at how much of the workforce is employed by specifically the federal government. In D.C., it's 51%. That makes sense. Virginia and Maryland, 4% and 5% respectively. But when you look at the numbers of the impact that we saw from the last government shutdown in 2019, D.C. estimated that it lost about $47 million in revenue. You didn't have people going to the restaurant because you had tourists that maybe weren't coming in because the Smithsonian museums were closed, in addition to the workers that maybe just simply didn't want to eat out during a time that paychecks weren't coming in.
So we call part of that area the Beltway. Let's widen the scope a little bit. What could be the ripple effect beyond the Beltway?
Yeah, well, I'm highlighting 3 other states that have a high concentration of people employed by the federal government. Hawaii is one of them. In Honolulu, 7% of the people there are employed by the government. Tourism is big there. 16% of Americans actually said they canceled or plan to cancel their Hawaii trips because of the 2019 shutdown, a big impact there. I also want to highlight Alaska, 4.5% employed by the government, 9% in Fairbanks. By the way, 60% of Alaska's land managed by the federal government. The Department of the Interior has a lot of employees in that state. Again, they also have military and oil operations there. And then the last state I want to point out here is West Virginia. They have about 6% employed in the Parkersburg, Vienna area of that state. Major government employers, the Veterans Affairs, as well as the Treasury, which operates a Office of Fiscal Service in the state as well, Joe.
All right, Brian Chung breaking it down for us. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.